I want to talk about time. Time is something that we don't really understand. Apparently it doesn't exist. But I think it's really important to understand the value of time. You learn the value of time when you get sick. When you start to realise you've got a disease, or when you come down with a disease, you get desperate. You no longer have the freedom you once had, and it really affects everything that you want to do and that you thought you were going to do, your dreams, your aspirations, and it completely changes your whole life, your whole outlook. In my opinion, it changes it for the better, depending on what you do with the information when you get it. But it's something that I want to teach you, because everyone around me is getting sick. I don't know many people that haven't got some kind of issue that they're dealing with, whether it be minimal, whether they can kind of just get on with it and still go to work. Besides the point, someone, whoever I speak to has always got some kind of issue, or someone in their family has an issue, or something. And it's getting more and more increased lately. Obviously, you hear me ranting and raving 2 or 3 times a week about it being blue light and EMF and all this kind of shit, and you hear me, oh yeah, Sean talks about blue light and sunlight and going outside, and but I don't think you really get what I'm saying and the real deep implications of what we're doing with our light environment, especially concerning time. So I've learned a lot about biology and biochemistry in the last 4 years. As someone who never had a science background, I've never studied it at college or uni, at school. I think I had to drop down to the foundation set where we didn't do an exam, we did coursework instead because we were failing. So I was in like set 4 out of 5. I think I got a B in that, but it's not really a B, I didn't really do an exam. Basically what I'm saying is I was shit at science. I wasn't really interested. And the 5 years after I left school, from 16 to 21, I obviously degenerated, as you've probably seen in other videos, and deteriorated physically in my gut, but also my whole body, my brain, everything, and my actual reality, my life got really shit. I've explained that before, I've mentioned it briefly, but you're probably not picking up on that being tied into this, but it is, it really, really is. And I truly believe that our reality is shaped by our choices, and our choices, such as what kind of light we choose to be bathed in, I see as the biggest effect on our reality. And it might be hard to grasp that concept at the moment, and that's why I don't go too deep into it, because people are like, what the hell? But this is real. This is the kind of the crossover between quantum physics and spirituality and energy and sort of God and like the universe, the law of attraction. There's a bit of a crossover here, and the law of attraction and all that, a lot of people say like bollocks, but equally you could say that about quantum physics. But the difference is that there's men in white lab coats with glasses on, looking all professional and clever like Einstein and fucking Stephen Hawking, talking about quantum physics. So your bias is to trust them and everything they say. But for anyone who's a physicist or knows physics, there's a famous quote by I think it's Niels Bohr, who was the guy who was basically debating with Einstein about physics for about 30-40 years. And he famously said, if you think you understand quantum physics, then you clearly don't understand it, because it's not logical, it's not comprehensible. The whole thing is completely counterintuitive to anything that we see in our reality, and I actually believe there's a purpose for that. I believe we're blind to it for a reason. So what I'm basically saying about time is that time doesn't exist in quantum mechanics, quantum physics. It doesn't exist. It's just a manifestation of thermodynamics. Okay, Sean, what the fuck does that mean? So basically, time is time is manifested when light is slowed down by mass, and we perceive time in the linear fashion as we do because essentially all life that we see and all things around us are slowly releasing heat, losing energy into their environment and dying. So I know it's a bit dark. So we actually see that happen. But in terms of the actual universe, time isn't an object. It isn't a thing. It's just how we perceive. It's how we view life occurring in front of us. And health, disease, is actually where time manifests. And the less time you have, the quicker you die, the worse your disease state is. But the more you can expand and dilate time, the better. And we actually do this in our mitochondria inside our cells. The mitochondria really are the key. Now, moving away from physics a little bit, the top researcher in mitochondrial biology and bioenergetics is called Douglas Wallace, and he has shown beyond a shadow of a doubt that every 10 years our mitochondria, which are producing energy for us, naturally accrue damage in their DNA. Okay, so mitochondria actually have their own DNA. It's a ring, and instead of our structure, which is tightly packaged and protected, try to explain this as best as I can. The mitochondrial DNA is a ring, and it's quite exposed. And we have thousands of mitochondria in each cell, and we have trillions of cells, so we have beyond imaginable levels of mitochondria throughout our body. The most dense parts of the body which have mitochondria are the brain and the heart, for obvious reasons. Another real dense part is our bone. And mitochondria really the only place they're not found is in red blood cells, which don't have a nucleus either, which I'll get onto in another video probably. So in the mitochondria, they have their own DNA, which build these huge protein towers. Imagine the skyscrapers in New York, okay? And they are, one second. Forgot I already did a video on mitochondria, so let's have to see how this looks. Okay, so these things, they're called respiratory proteins, yeah? So basically, what I've explained before is that when food comes into the mitochondria, it's broken down in the Krebs and citric acid cycle, and basically we take the electrons and protons from glucose, fats, proteins, whatever, and we make NADH, and the H is basically a hydrogen atom with an electron, and so it drops off these respiratory proteins, which are these big skyscrapers, okay? Compared to an electron, say if you're the size of an electron, these would look like skyscrapers. These would look fucking astronomically tall. And so basically, this is where the electrons channel, and this is how we make energy. So electron basically jump from skyscraper to skyscraper. They actually sort of run down the stairs in every skyscraper. They kind of tunnel through the building, and then they transfer to the next one, and then they go all the way through it, up the stairs, all the way to the top, and they jump to the next one. It's a little bit like, imagine an electron is like a parkour, someone who does parkour, who's just running through fucking skyscrapers and jumping from the top of the building to the next building, and then working his way through that one, and then going all the way back up, and that's how they kind of move through these proteins. And as they do it, as they're moving through each of these floors, they're moving through iron and different metals and changing their kind of their structure. Imagine the skyscraper was actually split into like rotating parts, and every time the electron moved through it, the floor would spin. So you're in this like spinning floor skyscraper where all the parts are moving as these people are running through them. It's like a crazy house that you get at like a theme park or something. Like, just that's kind of what happens. And as these floors move, it allows the proton to move through the skyscraper. It allows the proton to go up as the electron's going out or going through. It allows the protons to be pumped through, and we end up having all these protons, this H plus, positively charged, right, accumulate above here, and eventually it works its way through the ATP. It comes back down, and it makes this ATP this ATPase spin, and it creates ATP. And ATP is like a £1 coin for energy. Every time you want to do an action, you need ATP. I don't strictly agree with that. That ATP is actually the reason we make energy. I actually think it's embedded into water, actually how we are energized. But the dogma and the modern understanding in biochemistry and biology is that ATP is the key molecule. So I'll just keep it fucking simple for you. Because to be honest, I haven't got the data to prove that properly yet anyway. So it's just my bias that we don't do that. But that will change. So yeah, so this is how we make energy. This is how every moment I'm moving my hands, moving my lips, moving my fucking eyes, talking, generating the thought, everything I'm doing, standing up, breathing, my bowels are working right now, my kidneys are working, my lungs are breathing, my muscle, everything depends on this. Every single fucking thing in your body depends on this chain. That's why you have this chain, 1,500 of these in every mitochondria, roughly, in every mitochondria, and you have about 3,000 in every fucking cell. Because without this, life doesn't exist. Well, life does exist, but complex life doesn't exist. So back 3-4 billion years ago on this planet, it was only simple organisms, bacteria. So what they were is there were cells, a little bit like this, with a membrane around it. In fact, these are bacteria. Mitochondria are bacteria. And what happened was a big bacteria it basically engulfed one of these and made make energy for it, and it allowed it to focus on, it allowed the bigger cell, the bigger bacteria, to not have to worry about making energy all the time. It basically used this as a slave, and as it did that, it was able to basically use that energy generated to become more complex, to build fancier and bigger structures. And as this mitochondria divided within that cell, it created more and more energy, because obviously bacteria can clone themselves, but they can't reproduce, they can't have sex with each other, basically. They can't. That's why they never became complex. But now, once this change happened, once this conversion of two life forms happened, it created a third form of life, and that is eukaryotes. That's what we're called. Bacteria are called prokaryotes, and the eukaryotic kingdom is all plants and all animals, all insects, which is incredible. So this is the origin of fucking life right here. What we're looking at is the mitochondria. It's unbelievably fundamental, and I sort of got to track a little bit, but they have their own DNA because they were once bacteria themselves. They had a lot of DNA, but what happened is they slowly shed a lot of that DNA because the actual big cell around it had its own DNA, and that cell kept that was the controlling DNA, it was the dominant DNA. But the mitochondria retained a certain amount of genes. I think it's about 30 or 37 genes they've still got. And those genes form the proteins that build these complexes. So most of these have genes that come from the outside, that come from the nucleus. But some critical DNA comes from inside the mitochondrial DNA, and it builds these, and it's critical for these skyscrapers. So what happens naturally, this one here is called cytochrome C oxidase, or cytochrome 4. I know you can only see 3. That's because that's cytochrome 1, that's cytochrome 3, that's cytochrome 4. Cytochrome 2 is basically another entry point where fat goes into. So cytochrome 1 is where sugar is metabolized, but cytochrome 2 is where fat's metabolized. There actually is only 3 complexes. It's just 1 and 2 are either sugar or fat. That's the only difference. So you've got cytochrome 1 if we're talking about sugar, 1, 3 and 4, and then the ATPase is cytochrome 5, but really that's its own thing. And this complex 4, cytochrome C oxidase, basically it holds, I don't know if you can see that, oxygen. You've got O2 there. Well, as the hydrogen proton comes down here and the electrons come through, they bind to oxygen and they make water, okay? But sometimes these electrons, if oxygen is held in a tight bond between iron and copper. It's iron and copper in this skyscraper. So imagine oxygen is being held hostage at the bottom of the fourth skyscraper by a copper atom, and an iron atom, and it's tightly held there. But just naturally, about 1 to 4% of the time, oxygen becomes free. And when this happens, electrons, because an oxygen is so electronegative, that's why we use oxygen to pull electrons towards it. And what it does is the fourth skyscraper uses oxygen as a hostage to pull the electrons towards it. A little bit like a bait, really. It's almost like in a film where, like an action film where like Arnold Schwarzenegger's being baited by the villains who've got his wife hostage. His wife and kids are hostage. Well, oxygen is the wife and kid. But to get Arnie to come through all the skyscrapers, and on the way, hopefully you're going to kill him, but on the way, he's going to move through all of those skyscrapers and make changes along the way, and those protons get pumped through. And then as he gets to the fourth one, he's the electron, Arnie is, he's going to get there, and then he's going to, once he's passed through that fourth skyscraper and protons have been pumped up, then he's allowed to bind with his wife and kids back to oxygen. So, and when that happens, two electrons together, because electrons always move in pairs down this membrane, two electrons together will bind to oxygen and the hydrogen that comes through, and that will create water. But if one electron comes through and binds to oxygen, because oxygen's been released by the villains, by copper and iron, too early, that's going to make oxygen into actually something called superoxide. And superoxide is very reactive. It's what we call a free radical or an oxidant. So you've probably heard of people taking antioxidants, take turmeric or eat your vegetables and they give you antioxidants or whatever, yeah? Vitamin E, vitamin K, what else have they got? Vitamin C, massive one. Beta carotene from fucking carrots and sweet potatoes and stuff. So what they're actually doing is what biochemistry is saying, or what the food world, the nutrition gurus are all telling you, is when we get naturally occurring oxidants, because it does 1 to 4% leakage of oxygen equals about 1 to 4% generation of free radicals. When this becomes too increased, when we lose oxygen too much, we get too many free radicals, and we need antioxidants to bind to them to basically take the electron back off oxygen to make it less reactive. That's all oxidants are really doing. But there's been studies come out that have shown that you can't actually affect the inner mitochondrial level of oxidants or antioxidants based on what you take. Inside this mitochondria here, it is so densely packed with proteins, solutes, ions, that the water here is actually more of a gel than actual water. It's highly regulated what's allowed in here. Highly regulated. So taking antioxidants from vegetables or supplements isn't going to affect the generation of free radicals here. And to be honest, I'm going to tell you it's a good thing that we generate these free radicals in a small amount. There's a highly specific and highly sensitive critical number or quantity or amount of free radicals that we need, because there's a feedback system where if this generates free radicals, the mitochondria actually responds to improve energy. So just a little burst of oxidation, of problems, will create a response to actually make your energy better. This is a little bit how exercise works. So exercise, actually, you're bringing in more oxygen, you're stressing the system, you're making this chain happen faster and faster and faster. And as it happens, you generate a lot of free radicals because you're bringing in a lot of oxygen, generating a lot of oxidants. That is actually the stimulus to improve mitochondrial function afterwards, as a hormetic response. So I'm going to tell you that oxidants and free radicals aren't something that you want to try and fucking get in the way of by taking loads of supplements. Which is why if you watch my supplements video, I'll tell you that it's not a good idea to supplement unless you know exactly what you're doing or you've got a specific reason to be doing it. And there are specific reasons, there are times when you need to do it, but a lot of the time for most people don't do it. So if you start throwing things into the system, you're going to give this mitochondria very mixed signals. It is a very, very smart and specific, like quantum computer, what's going on here. If you start throwing in signals from the outside, too much vitamin A, too much vitamin C, too much vitamin E, it's going to have an effect. And I can't fully tell you what that's going to be because it's highly specific based on your mitochondrial DNA, your environment, everything. So chill on the fucking supplements. If you're one of them people that's taking like 10 a day, 5 a day, even like 1 a day, just think twice about doing that. But again, there is context. You can use them sometimes. So basically, this 1 to 4% of oxidants that get created, actually, the mitochondrial DNA which is in here can be damaged by this. And this is what Doug Wallace, which I was talking about 10 minutes ago before I went on this fucking tirade. Doug Wallace has actually shown that this damage to the DNA, these mutations that occur based on this natural pulse of oxidation that's happening, these natural free radicals that are hitting the DNA, every 10 years, no matter what we do, this DNA accrues damage. And what that means is, when those DNA when we come to build the proteins for this chain, these skyscrapers, your drawings or your blueprint for those are incorrect. So they no longer spin and operate and function as they once did. Every 10 years, purely based on accrual of mitochondrial DNA damage, through this oxidation, we become less and less efficient at generating energy. And this process becomes less and less efficient. This, my friends, is aging. This is how every 10 years we start to lose our ability to generate energy and our function starts to decline. So going back to the start of this video, what is time? Time for the cell is effectively how good you can produce energy. How good is your electron chain transport? How good is this process? But what Wallace said was that basically disease that we're seeing is a rapid onset of the natural aging process. So when you have blue light and non-native EMF from Wi-Fi, 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, fucking 1G, your phone, you know, your computer, everything, as I've explained elsewhere, it changes the flux of calcium in your mitochondria and in your cells, and it signals cell death and inflammation, okay? So calcium moving in and out of your cells is actually the signal for more free radicals. The calcium channels that exist in all your cell membranes and your mitochondrial membranes is highly sensitive to light. So It's really highly sensitive to electromagnetic fields too. That's why calcium is used. And this is actually a massive increase in free radicals. So that 1 to 4% is no longer the case. It's now 10%, or it's now 12%, or it's now 14%, or it's now even higher. I don't actually know what percentage it's going to be, but it's going to be higher, it's going to be more. So you're now destroying your skyscrapers very efficiently. You are fucking them up. In fact, you're throwing grenades through the building windows every time you're doing this. And you're setting fire to the blueprints for these buildings, which you need for energy. And so this is why mitochondrial function is linked to every single disease out there. Diabetes, atherosclerosis, neurodegenerative diseases, I mean, you name it. It's every disease associated, because apart from the blood, all cells contain these mitochondria, and that's where the site of free radicals is. That's where it's generated. Some of the free radicals can sort of diffuse out of the mitochondria and go into the cell, but the really most damaging ones can't diffuse out of the cell because they're so reactive that they would interact with the cell membrane and destroy it. That's called the hydroxyl radical, and that will literally be formed on the spot, and it'd be like a bomb going off. So really, in the mitochondria, that's where the hydroxyl radical is operating, and the more of that you have, it's okay in a small amount for that sort of response that I was talking about earlier, that repair effect. But on a consistent basis, this is how mitochondrial dysfunction occurs. And when you lose mitochondrial function, you can say hello to a new disease. But the key is that Wallace also taught us that mitochondrial heteroplasmy which is what mitochondrial DNA damage accrual is. Is that it's reversible. And so what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to teach you, is that if you improve your mitochondrial function by removing out, first of all, the stimulus, blue light, EMF, that's stealing your energy production by affecting calcium, driving the increase of free radicals in the cell, and destroying the mitochondrial DNA, increasing heteroplasmy. If you remove that, you're going to allow your mitochondria to repair, recover, and improve. And that will expand time in your life. That will dilate time. You've just given yourself time back. The other way we do it is cytochrome C oxidase complex 4 is a red light. Chromophore. What the fuck does that mean, Sean? It absorbs red and infrared light effectively. It loves that light, and it's been shown in so many studies now that adding red light or infrared light, which the sun is 42% of this light, remember that. Sunrise, sunset, all through the day, 42% of that sunlight is red and infrared light. That is what makes the ATPase spin faster. It's also what improves the function of cytochrome C oxidase, so it can bind and hold oxygen better. So we generate less free radicals from that side. And improve mitochondrial function. The water, the H2O that I just showed you, that is here, that is formed with oxygen and the 2 electrons and the hydrogen, that surrounds the mitochondria. And that whole, all those skyscrapers are actually an underwater city. It's Atlantis. So the whole thing is immersed in water. So guess what water is? Water is a red light chromophore. It absorbs massive amounts of red and infrared light. So when it does this, it forms an exclusion zone. It actually becomes a different phase. So you have solid, liquid and gas. Everyone knows that. There's actually a 4th phase of water called the exclusion zone. What that does is the water's density, the molecules become more dense. It actually brings all of the skyscrapers closer together, so the electron, the parkour jumper, can traverse through the skyscrapers more efficiently, and it's going to tightly hold oxygen in that place a lot better. It's not going to leak oxygen, it's not going to leak free radicals as much as it does. So getting in the sun changes the phase of water within us to better generate energy, expand and dilate time in our cells and our biology, and keep disease away. But not only that, is that I also believe, as a bias, my own belief is that it will improve your actual reality. The actual life around you will improve the more you get in the sun, the more you pay attention to mitochondrial biology and biophysics by getting the right light into your cell. This is what can actually change your life. This is what can actually manifest better things into your life. Now again, I haven't got a scientific mechanism to explain that. I don't know if I ever will be able to explain it, but it's definitely something I experienced, and it's definitely something I believe in. So don't just see this as like blue light, oh yeah, Sean's talking about artificial light and wear blue blockers and blah 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 blah, like it goes a lot deeper. But the good news is that what I've just said to you shows that all disease is reversible. It's not a permanent state, which is why it never used to exist in the forms that it does now. Now we see disease as, you've got it, that's it. You know, you're just unlucky if you get it. It's a roll of the dice. I'm going to tell you that's not fucking true. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. You know, all the other animals and all the other species out there don't have that. We've just accepted this based on listening to data from people who have no fucking clue about mitochondrial biology. And that is the truth. Is they don't know about the 4th phase of water. They don't know about the physics of water. They don't know, and they're choosing to ignore mitochondrial biology. They're choosing to ignore Doug Wallace's work. They're choosing to ignore Nick Lane's work. You know, but the key for you is listening to this. Don't rely on your experts. I mean, check what I'm saying. Pick up the books that I'm telling you to get. Fact check me. You know? In reality, I'm trying to teach you how to fucking think for yourself. That's effectively what we have to do. Because the doctors aren't going to help you. Your mum ain't going to help you. Your dad's not going to help you. Your brothers and sisters ain't going to help you. Neither's your dog. Neither's your boss at work. Neither's your counsellor. Neither's your therapist. Neither's your personal trainer. No one has any fucking clue about this effect. No one. And this is why it's absolutely critical that it's critical that you learn and pay attention to this, or else you're going to lose time and your reality is going to suffer. Yeah, I feel like that might be it. Fuck me, probably about 25-minute video. So yeah, after all that, get outside.